The modern conservative movement arguably came into its full incarnation in the early 50s, publication by a fellow by the name of Russell Kirk of a book called The Conservative Mind. And Russell Kirk's book was read by William F. Buckley Jr. and by basically all the major conservatives. They still refer to it constantly. It is the Bible of conservatism. And Kirk, and the opening chapter in that book, The Conservative Mind, which is still in print and still held, talk to any conservative and just mention, that Russell Kirk, oh, yes, God, yes. The opening chapter is about a fellow by the name of Sir Edmund Burke, who arguably created the modern conservative movement in Anglo-Saxon circles. He was a British lord. He's the guy, Sir Edmund Burke, he's the guy that when the French Revolution was starting, and Thomas Paine was like, oh boy, another revolution, I gotta go see this thing, hops on a boat, goes to England, he spends 2 weeks in Edmund Burke's house as his house guest, and then goes to France where he gets promptly arrested, mental illness story. But in any case, he got into this huge pissing war, this major verbal battle over these 2 weeks with Sir Edmund Burke about the nature of man, the nature of humanity, whether people were good or evil. And he wrote an entire book as a rebuttal to Burke. And that book is The Rights of Man by Thomas Paine, which now, if you decide to read that book, you'll have the context, which is actually really important. Because Burke, one of Burke's most famous quotes, and I'm paraphrasing it, I don't have it memorized word for word, because it's a kind of arcane language, but to paraphrase it, one of his most famous quotes, and Kirk quotes this in The Conservative Mind, was, "It does me no harm if a man as servile as a tallow maker, candle maker, or a hairdresser is allowed to engage in his profession. But it does society considerable violence if such a man is allowed to participate in governance," in other words, to vote. So why would the modern conservative movement and the early American and at the time European conservative movement think that the average person should not vote? This really goes back to the 1634, when Thomas Hobbes published Leviathan, which opened the argument. It was the beginning of the Enlightenment. It really arguably kicked it off. And Hobbes in Leviathan put forward two arguments, one which became the modern conservative movement, one which became the modern liberal movement. The modern liberal movement that he put forward was the idea that man can govern himself, to use the language of the day. That we can govern ourselves, that we don't have to have divinely ordained kings. That was picked up in 1774 or 1674 by John Locke in his Second Treatise on Government, when he talked about life, liberty, and the right to private property, which Jefferson then later changed to happiness. And it was picked up in the 1680s by Jean-Jacques Rousseau as he was looking at the tribal people who were being discovered principally in Africa, and saying, hey, these people have pretty good lives, and the idea of the noble savage and humanity's essential goodness. So there was that. And then the other idea that Hobbes put forward in Leviathan was that, on the other hand, the essential nature of humanity is to be evil, that people are evil. And this comported with Christianity of the day, the idea of original sin, because we're born of woman, and Eve ate that apple, and therefore we're all sinners, and therefore we need salvation, etc., etc. And Hobbes' quote about that is that in his natural state, man would have no means of locomotion, no means to machinery, no arts, no sciences, no literature, and life would be short, nasty, and brutish, and again, badly paraphrased. So the conservative movement, the struggle for the conservatives, for progressives, for liberals, it has been literally from Hobbes to Locke to Rousseau to Jefferson to the Progressive Caucus. It's always been, how do we get the majority of the people to work together and all have a voice, because collectively we know we're all good. We know that at our core, humankind is good, and that we will make the right decisions. That's why Jefferson argues so strongly for power to be at the most local level, because people will make good and wise decisions. So when you understand that conservatives believe actually the opposite of that humans are essentially evil, and as in fact the quote that I gave you from Leviathan about life being nasty, short, and brutish, it's preceded by 4 or 5 paragraphs with Hobbes pointing out that without the iron fist of church or state, then we will devolve into our natural state and life will be natural. So conservatives are stuck with this conundrum. If you believe that people are evil, fundamentally, and yet we have to be governed, how do you figure out how to govern? And the historic answer has been, God will figure that out. God will figure that out. God is going to ordain people. In fact, if you look at the British coins, there's several letters on the British coins, something Rex, something, and what it stands for, I forgot, but now it's Latin for she rules by the grace of God. So there was this Calvinistic notion, John Calvin brought it to the United States, in fact, like his followers did, that how do you know who are the people that God has ordained to be the wise elders? And historically with kings and queens, it was the birth lineage, it must be in their DNA. But when we blew that up, it was, well, how do we know? Well, it must be the people who are rich. That's how you know. And this is the problem that conservatives are stuck with right now, is they want to have leadership, and they're like, okay, how do we pick the good people? Well, it must be that God blessed these people, therefore they're rich. Let's put them in charge.
You get it wrong.
Yeah, and exactly. And so, you know, just to wrap that up and close, because I've gone way beyond my time.
You're an ironic concept here. Finally, I figured out why they chose Mitt Romney.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. It makes perfect sense to conservatives. Mitt Romney makes perfect sense to conservatives. He proved that he was a good person. He proved by being rich. Absolutely. And
he certainly didn't prove it by being a good candidate.
No, or being a decent, you know. So the fundamental, you know, so on the right, there may be a pretense of an inside-outside strategy. The Koch brothers would fund Freedom Works to fund, you know, to get buses to bring people in for a Tea Party demonstration, but they really don't believe it. They're not really listening to their base, as it were. And that's why it's so important, what Laura was talking about, is now that they've actually started this grassroots base, let's us talk to it. Because, you know, the conservatives, they're genuinely not listening to their base because they don't believe that the base has anything to say to them. They're instead listening to the people above them. It's totally hierarchical, patriarchal, the whole thing. So this provides us with a whole lot of opportunities, and it also explains why the inside-outside strategy is so important for progressives, because it is our core. It has been since the days of the Enlightenment, the British Revolution, the American Revolution, and, you know, right through to today. And it also exposes this horrible fundamental weakness of conservative worldview and perspective. The strength is they got billions and billions of dollars on their side. And they have used these kinds of Calvinist justifications to justify everything from slavery to the modern, you know, to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Somebody's got to be in charge. Let's have some wise elders. Not even nations. No, nations are too unpredictable. And it exposes that. So I think that these are the, you know, this is kind of the broad brush stuff that I try to frame things in so people can understand the individual niche issues, because they almost always break into these kinds of things, these kinds of factors.
Fantastic. It's nice to come out of a PDA session and actually think you're smarter than you